Everyone, I'll be talking about meta-reasoning for comprehensive troubleshooting, but despite the overlap in topic with John, there hasn't been much synergy. I haven't seen John's talk yet, so it'll be a little bit of a different take. But this is basically talking about proposed work, as this is a grant that we were just awarded. So comprehensive troubleshooting, it goes beyond routine troubleshooting, replicating expert human level skills. And so that's, real world situations where troubleshooting, you'll encounter complex, novel faults, and they'll require a wide range of knowledge and cognitive skills, including meta reasoning. State of the art is a lot of limitations, like pre-planned responses, like checklists and fault trees cannot address unpredicted complex issues. Deep learning strategies can be effective for limited troubleshooting, like fault classification, but they, of course, have issues for anything that's outside their training data. And cognitive architectures support meta reasoning, but they've been limited so far in explorations to narrow domain and task-specific scenarios. And so the requirements that we see for comprehensive troubleshooting is the capabilities and knowledge to identify, diagnose, and address complex unseen faults. That we need inexpensive and reliable methods for acquiring domain-specific troubleshooting knowledge. A lot of the knowledge you'll need will be very specific to this situation and not just some general troubleshooting knowledge that you have. And finally, that we'll need meta-reasoning and control knowledge to guide comprehensive troubleshooting. And so we believe that comprehensive troubleshooting is essential for reliable autonomy, where you are going to need to address and identify unanticipated problems that inevitably will occur, and we can't rely on a human to troubleshoot these problems. So our overall plan is to leverage large language models and cognitive architectures to build on cognitive capabilities to support the troubleshooting steps, develop meta reasoning for control, and I'll go over that in a little bit. To use large language models to provide the required knowledge, specifically looking at the kind of domain-specific knowledge. Start basically on the left, you can see with generic knowledge about systems models, general troubleshooting, and meta reasoning. And from that, learn grounded domain-specific knowledge for troubleshooting and meta reasoning. From that, achieve expert level knowledge through learning. So here we kind of have laid out the steps and the cognitive capabilities and knowledge required for troubleshooting. On the left here, we have troubleshooting steps that have been identified from DoD sources. And then next to that, more kind of typical troubleshooting processes from monitoring and detection to data analysis, hypothesis formulation, repair planning, execution, and post-repair reflection. And those depend on a whole different host of cognitive capabilities, which themselves depend on a lot of different types of knowledge. And what might happen, so I'll go back, in a routine troubleshooting scenario is you kind of just step from one to another. You find the problem, you gather data, you have a synthesis, you evaluate it and look at it. But with a lot of complicated troubleshooting problems, it isn't just step one to the next. And so what we envision is meta reasoning orchestration that is controlling what capabilities and knowledge is needed. So you might be in the middle of analysis and then realize that you need to collect more data, or there might be another fault that you detect that requires some monitoring. So there isn't just a straightforward path. And for each of these, what knowledge you need might require in the specific situation. So we envision meta reasoning here powered by a language model kind of for the control process in terms of what knowledge do I need and what processes should I engage with next, what capabilities. And so the innovations here are to leverage large language model advancements as a source of domain-specific knowledge for troubleshooting and meta reasoning, to leverage our prior work on accessing and verifying task knowledge from large language models for cognitive agents, current work that we're doing on orchestrating with large language models, to build on cognitive architecture capabilities and skills orchestrated by meta reasoning and the large language model. Our overall objectives are to acquire domain-specific troubleshooting knowledge and to acquire domain-specific meta reasoning knowledge to orchestrate the usage of the cognitive capabilities. And then finally, to learn expert-level comprehensive troubleshooting knowledge through the integration of these knowledge and capabilities. So in year one, we looked at just developing kind of the simple troubleshooting processes in Soar and exploring simple comprehensive troubleshooting problems and integrating with simulators. Year two, really we want to focus more on exploiting large language models to try to get that domain-specific meta reasoning and troubleshooting knowledge. and to leverage ongoing work such as with lane graph for meta-reasoning orchestration, and to learn more complex troubleshooting problems. And year 3 really will be focused on leveraging the learning mechanisms in Soar to learn long-term knowledge from the specialized meta-reasoning and troubleshooting knowledge that we get, and of course perform experiments on more complex problems. In terms of experiments, we will evaluate these in a simulation environment. I think first we're planning to start with a simple simulation environment, possibly drawn from other work. This is still kind of up in the air what we would use. We were looking at possibly things like Factorio, but then we want to move to a more kind of DoD, given the funding relevance simulator, such as the one seen on the right, which is a ship engine simulator that can have a lot of different faults that you'll have to diagnose. In terms of evaluation, we'll be looking at the solution performance, the efficiencies, looking at the time and agent processing costs, and even tokens for large language models, and also transfer, the ability of the agent to use knowledge from one task or even within the same task to allow it to learn faster. So nuggets and coals, there's not a lot since this is work that hasn't really started yet. Other than developing the grant, but the grant is awarded, so that's great. And I think there's a lot of good synergy with other projects, working with large language models, with meta reasoning and metacognition. So I think that there's kind of a lot of interconnected parts which we can lean on. And the goal, of course, is that we haven't started yet. We're waiting to receive funding, which normally would be a guarantee, but in these times is a little bit less certain. But hopefully in the next couple months, we at least have a scheduled presentation on this in June. And so at that point, I'll ask for any questions.
Are you going to involve any human in the loop type modeling to begin with? So there's a lot of established knowledge, particularly for ancient DoD systems. Follow up on that, are you considering use of anything like a Bayesian network to model that?
On human in the loop, that's definitely something we've thought about, and that's something we've worked on with a lot of different systems, where especially if it's really there, maybe even just on the loop versus in the loop, kind of just providing a little bit of guidance. So we haven't exactly worked out, where we work on that, but that it is something that we've thought about, less so on Bayesian. I think we'll need to think of some of these sets of things for doing the troubleshooting steps, and especially in terms of doing diagnosis, which we've done a little bit in the past.
Sounds good. Biased here because I had a Bayesian project. It was killed because it was working pretty well, and it didn't involve a deep neural network.
Yeah, of course. You need to have that somewhere in a box somewhere, so you can just claim it.
Thanks. Good talk.
Is the engine simulation, is that in LabVIEW?
I don't think so. It's actually made by a Polish guy. I think it looks kind of LabVIEW-ish.
Okay.
I think so. And we're definitely open. We might that isn't kind of a locked-in simulator.
Hi, this is Mike Miller. Just had a quick question.
Go ahead.
What is the trigger for this for your module? So typically, a failed prediction is a trigger, for the remediation. Is there any particular trigger or thing in the system that will trigger this entire process?
Yeah, so I think a trigger is definitely failure, but I think also a trigger, and it's something that's very Soar-like, is an impasse, where you reach a stage where you can't move forward anymore. You can't, the hypothesis you came up with, you evaluated and it doesn't fix the problem, or you enter this point where you have a hard time moving to the next step. And so that really is kind of, I think, one of the main triggers that we are looking at here for engaging kind of that meta reasoning control to say, hey, what do I need to do next to progress?
Okay, thank you. I wrote a book in 2018 called Building Minds with Patterns. It's one of the design patterns there, agentic design patterns, is discovery, and it creates hypotheses and also tests the hypotheses, generates tests to test the hypotheses. You may want to look at that as well. It could be a source of inspiration as well.
Great, thank you very much. I'll look into that.
Hi, this is Joe McDonald. One of the things that I notice quite a bit in what's happening today is that there doesn't seem to be much talk about uh, bridging different types of knowledge domains. And in my experience, that is critical for most decisions. Um, and I've been focused on working in that area. Uh, how does what you're planning on doing uh, introduce the connections between various knowledge domains? Because in almost every scenario we deal with, uh, the knowledge domains overlap. So I tend to prefer to focus on cognition, not at the subject matter level, but at the topic level, and topics can span multiple knowledge domains.
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges will be to trying to learn some generalized knowledge, so it isn't just very specific to your specific scenario. And I think that that'll be a challenge. And I think, certainly I think we're planning on starting with, kind of tasks that are very similar, so we can kind of hopefully learn some kind of higher level abstractions, but I think that's something that we definitely need to investigate. So sorry, I don't
Okay.
have much of an answer to that.
Okay, I spend a lot of time in that area, but just so in case that helps.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to the next file.
I have another one question.
Sorry. Sorry,
I have a clarifying questions. When LLM character the whole system, is LLM in charge of generating those mega reasoning, or the mega reasoning generates in the Soar agent?
So I think what we're planning is that the meta reasoning would be driven by the language model. That's at least kind of our initial vision, where it'll be kind of in charge of selecting, what to do next. But then that might engage, some cognitive capability from Soar, who's doing some hypothesis generation.
Okay, thank you so much.